Um, so with each one of these birth stories, and speaking of birth stories as initiation, there they are birth stories as affirmations and birth stories as reminders and all those wonderful things. So when I was talking about my uh, second born and how every birth is unique because every baby is unique, because I'm a new person when every baby is born, because the world has shifted, because the family has shifted. So by my third pregnancy and birth, um, and that's my youngest son. That pregnancy and birth taught me that blessings can come even when adversity is coming, and they can happen alongside each other. And it doesn't mean that the blessing doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that the adversity is not real. So being raised in the church, um, and being raised in a society that is very bifurcated, it's good or bad. Things are good or bad. There's no gray. There's no gradient. There's no both and. It's either or. In church, oftentimes, if something was happening, things were happening poorly or in a bad way to someone, it was like, "What did you do? Let's check and see why God is allowing all these terrible things to occur." And the best example of that is the story of Lot. So we hear about Lot and all the things that are happening to Lot. Lot's going through this test. Um, so really, really terrible things. Uh, but even then, in that story, people ask Lot, "What did you do? What did you do to deserve God's ire in this way, God's anger in this way?" So with my youngest born son, during his pregnancy, we had custody issues with our second oldest son, third oldest child, second oldest son. Uh, so during the pregnancy of my youngest son, the police showed up at the house. So that was jarring, and the circumstances surrounding it were just sad. So it was, you know, and still I have a belly full of beautiful baby while this is happening. The During that pregnancy, my sister transitioned um, unexpectedly. She wasn't sick or anything. I received a call from my husband while I was running around getting ready for an event we were doing. We were doing Black Marriage Day in Richmond, Virginia, and I was running around with the other two, my two of my other girls, and we were running back and forth picking up stuff to have for this event, pretty things for the table, all these things. And I get a call, uh, and I'm so, when you're in the flow of doing something, I wasn't paying attention to anything else. So I get a call, and he says, "Pull over," and I'm like, "Why? I got stuff to do." Da 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 da. Um, and he was telling my mother had called him to tell me that my sister had passed, and it was I don't even remember the whole day. I remember being in the car and crying, belly full of baby, uh, a toddler, two toddlers in the car, and yet and still had a belly full of beautiful baby boy. Um, Going through the pain of losing my sister, had the support. I remember my sister-in-law came to bring food or asked me about food or something. It was such a blur. Uh, but still had family support, uh, and had a beautiful Black Marriage Day. The next day or 2 days later, or something like that. And so, because of the transition of my sister, my son was born near my sister's birthday. So even though I believe my parents had made peace with the fact that I was going to have this baby at home, had all these babies at home, and I know they were concerned at one point because of my birth story with my mother, um, they had made peace with it, as far as I could understand. But that was very hard for my mother. My son was born maybe 4 months after my sister transitioned, near her birthday. So for all the things that could, the word is usually trigger, but activate my mother in a way that would cause her concern and worry to leap is that her daughter is getting ready to have a baby. Um, Her other daughter is no longer in her flesh, and there is a baby being born near the date of the daughter who's transitioned. And my mother's behavior was so weird. It was so weird. She is generally a very supportive, very open, emotionally anticipatory. She's just a warm hug. She's a big old warm hug, and her reaction around the time of my youngest son's birth was anything but. It was filled with angst, frustration, uh, fear. She was saying things about being scared for the other two children while I was home. What if something terrible happened? Just all these things that she had never ever done with the other babies. And so it was jarring to me because this is not our first time out the gate. This is the third baby. This is a process that she's not unfamiliar with. She showed up behind the other two babies to help take care of me and take care of any big siblings that were there when another baby had been born. Uh, my, my mother is like she's like a Jedi of emotional intelligence. You know, everybody has shortcomings, but she's pretty doggone dope. And it was very odd for her to behave in that way. And it set me, I was like, whoa. And because their birthdays are so close, my son is almost, oh, he is a week to the day after his aunt's birthday. Uh, and so I was taken aback. And even with that, I still had a belly full of healthy baby and a scared and sad mother at the same time. So custody with one child, the death of a sibling, um, what felt like lack of support uh, from my mother, and all these things were occurring while I was in the joy of gestating and creating a body, or and housing a soul and protecting a spirit and all of those things. But what that shows me and showed me then was that just because there is adversity, it does not mean that the adversity is a payment for something you've done wrong. Uh, the adversity doesn't cancel out blessings. Blessings don't cancel out adversity. Adversity still occurs. I've heard it said a couple different ways that being safe doesn't mean that um, challenges won't arise. Just that you can stay uprighted in the challenges. If the challenges are waves, you don't fall out of the boat. You're still in the boat. Or if you fall out, you can still swim. And if you can't swim, you can still float. Like there's so many things that the protection of shrines and ancestors doesn't mean that nothing will ever happen to us, but it does mean that we will grow. It does mean that we will learn. It does mean that it will enrich our lives, whatever the challenge is, whatever the challenge is. So that is that's what my third birth taught me. And the interesting thing is the lessons that I've received from these children are also a lot of the energy they carry around themselves. So with this with this third born son, he is very accepting and loving and often looking for what the best possible reason could be for something, the best possible explanation for someone's behavior. He's looking for the light. So I am that was consistent from his pregnancy, my pregnancy with him, his birth, which was a blessing at home, another blessing at home, and one that my oldest born daughter was able to actually sit and watch. There's a picture of her and her daddy cheering as my son was born. So it was still joy. Uh, and that's what I received. That's what I received. Even in adversity, there is joy. Even with joy, there can be adversity. And that adversity is not a punishment. Even if adversity shows up by something that we have done or chosen to do, and maybe it is the law of things, it's karma, whatever it is, how we receive it makes a difference. And in that instant, but again, looking at my upbringing and the way that many people interpreted adversity, it wasn't a payback for anything negative. It wasn't a watch yourself. It was the opportunity to see that light and dark exist in these lives, and that good and bad exist in these lives. And we can celebrate, we can process, we can give grace. Um, yeah. So, OBKB, this is Reverend Akompo, Walimu, Yogi, Dula, all the things, Mama of these people, Sister Mama